I said get away from that case! Are you deaf, or are you just looking for a reason to be arrested?
I can fix it. I have seen one like it before.
You can fix it? That watch is worth more than you will earn in your entire life. Get out of my museum!
My grandfather made this watch. Please, look inside the case back. There is a small sun stamped next to the escapement opening.
I am not looking at anything. Security. Eject.
And just like that, 72 hours before the most important Black Heritage exhibition of the year opened to the international press, the only person in the world who knew how to make the centerpiece watch tick again was being dragged toward the front doors. They simply did not know it yet. 6 hours earlier, Lyric Greenwood had woken at exactly 4:52 in the morning. The same way she had woken every morning for 21 months. Her sleeping bag was tucked behind a low brick wall on the riverside of Memorial Park, 3 blocks from the public library and 4 blocks from the museum. The wall blocked the wind off the Providence River. The river smelled of cold mud and slow brown water. Above the wall, a small reproduction 19th century gas lamp gave off just enough orange light to read by. She had read by that lamp every night for almost 2 years. Under her sleeping bag, wrapped in a heavy oilcloth, was a small leather case. It was the only thing she carried that had any monetary value. It was a watchmaker's tool roll, 18 inches long, 47 pockets, hand-stitched by a man named Booker Greenwood in 1971. Inside were 43 miniature screwdrivers, 3 jeweler's loops, 2 pin vises, a glass crystal press, 1 balance staff turning tool, and a small folding leaf with a pair of brass tweezers her grandfather had once told her could remove a fly's eyelash if you were patient. She did not have a fly's eyelash to remove, but she had the tools, and she had patience, and on most mornings she had a single working antique pocket watch in her hoodie pocket, ticking against her rib cage like a small, steady second heart. She rolled up her sleeping bag. She tied the oilcloth tight around the tool roll. She stood up. She walked 4 blocks to the side entrance of the Providence Public Library, where the night janitor, Mr. Marvel Singletary, opened the back door at 5:30 every morning to take out the trash. He always pretended he did not see her slip inside. In the basement bathroom, Lyric washed her face, brushed her teeth, changed into her cleaner hoodie. She kept a second hoodie folded inside a Ziploc bag inside her backpack because the older homeless men at the shelter had once told her that smelling clean was the difference between being a person and being a problem. She washed her face every morning at 5:36 on the dot. At 6 o'clock, she went upstairs. Miss Ophelia Bridges was already at the reference desk, organizing the morning's interlibrary loan returns. 67 years old, black, silver dreadlocks pinned into a small, careful bun. She wore the same pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses she had worn since 1989. "Morning, baby," Miss Ophelia said, without looking up. She had a key to a locker behind the reference desk. The locker had Lyric's name on a piece of masking tape. Inside were 3 library textbooks Lyric was reading, a folded photocopy of an obscure 1972 academic paper, and a small black-and-white photograph of an older black man standing beside a pre-Civil War pocket watch, captioned in faded fountain pen ink, S. Greenwood, free clockmaker of Providence, with his daughter Pearl, age 14, April 1858. Lyric had found the photograph in a discarded archival box 3 years ago, when Miss Ophelia let her sift through the deaccessioned materials. She did not know who Solomon Greenwood was. She thought he had a kind face. She had taken it home and slipped it into the back of her notebook and forgotten about it for 2 years. Last week she had pulled it out again, because there was something about it that finally felt familiar, though she could not say what. Today she would find out. At 6:45, Lyric ate the half sandwich Miss Ophelia had wrapped in wax paper and left in her locker, turkey and Swiss on rye. Miss Ophelia had been doing that for 2 years, since the morning Lyric had passed out from low blood sugar near the periodicals section, and Miss Ophelia had quietly carried her to the staff room and given her a cup of orange juice and asked no questions. "Big day at the Westmoreland," Miss Ophelia said. She had seen the flyer Lyric had pinned to the inside of her locker. "You been talking about this for weeks. You ready? I'm ready. You bring your notebook?" "I bring my notebook everywhere, Miss Ophelia. You know that." The librarian smiled, the kind of small smile that does not move very much but lives in the eyes. "Bring it back, then. There's a new acquisition on the 3rd floor next week." Original 1854 issue of the Provincial Freeman. I'll save you a session with it. I'll be here. I know you will. Miss Ophelia turned back to her interlibrary loan returns. Her hands moved through the cards the way Lyric's hands moved through escapement parts. There was a particular dignity to the way certain people did their work when they thought nobody was watching. Miss Ophelia had been doing this work, in this building, since 1989, when she had moved up from Charleston after her own mother had died. She had never told Lyric this. Lyric had read it on the small bronze plaque under Miss Ophelia's name at the reference desk. Miss Ophelia, Lyric said, can I ask you something? Always. If something good happens today, you would want me to come tell you, right? The librarian looked up over the rim of her gold-rimmed reading glasses. She held Lyric's eyes for a moment. Baby, if something good happens today, you find a phone. Any phone. You call this library and you ask for me. I will be here. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. And if something bad happens, you do the same thing. Yes, ma'am. Now, go look at your watch. Lyric smiled, the kind of small smile that did not quite reach her eyes because she was holding too much inside the eyes already. She shouldered her backpack and walked out of the library and into the bright morning light of College Hill. Across town, the Westmoreland Horological Heritage Museum was waking up in a very different way. The museum sat on College Hill in a converted 19th-century textile mill that had been repurposed in 1937 by Theodore Westmoreland, a Providence industrialist who collected mechanical timepieces the way other rich men collected racehorses. 3 generations of Westmorelands had endowed the museum, and 3 generations of the Pemberton family had run it. The current executive director was Walter Pemberton III, 63 years old, with the kind of careful gray hair and unstained tweed jacket that announced, before any words were spoken, that he had been born into the seat he occupied. Walter was standing in the main exhibition hall at 9 a.m., overseeing the final placement of 47 display cases. Inside each case were 3 to 5 mechanical timepieces from the museum's permanent collection, supplemented for this exhibition by 28 loaned pieces from the Smithsonian, the Boston Athenaeum, and 3 private collections. The exhibition was titled Time and Liberty, the Mechanical Heritage of Black America. It would open to the international press on Monday evening and to the public on Tuesday morning. The exhibition had cost the museum $14.2 million. The Mellon Foundation had funded $11 million of that. PBS had committed to a 6-part documentary series. The Smithsonian had co-curated. Every major newspaper in the Northeast had a press credential confirmed. And in the center of the exhibition hall, raised on a small mahogany pedestal, inside a custom-built tempered glass case under museum-grade halogen lighting, sat the watch. It was a coin-form gold pocket watch, approximately 53 millimeters in diameter, with a hunter case. The dial was porcelain, hand-painted, with an unusual second subsidiary dial at the 6 o'clock position, showing a small painted sun rising over a horizon. The hands had stopped at 3:47. The watch had not run in 62 years. It had been made in 1,858 inches Detroit, Michigan, by a free black watchmaker named Solomon Greenwood, who had later moved to Providence and become an ordained minister of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Reverend Solomon Greenwood had used this very watch to time the secret meetings of the Providence Free African Society, an abolitionist organization that helped operate one of the northernmost stops on the Underground Railroad. The watch had been passed from Reverend Greenwood to his eldest daughter, Pearl Greenwood, then through 3 more generations of the Greenwood family, then lost to an estate sale in 1962, then recovered from an attic in Westerly, Rhode Island in February of 2024, then donated by the finder to the museum. The watch had stopped working sometime between 1962 and 2024. No one knew when, no one knew why. And for the past 3 weeks, a 41-year-old Swiss-trained master horologist named Sebastian Whitfield had been trying to make it tick again. He had been hired on a special contract for $480,000. He had been given a temporary workbench in the museum's conservation lab. He had been given access to every tool he had requested, every reference text, every microscope. He had been given Saturdays off and a private apartment in the city's east side at the museum's expense. He had been given everything except the one thing he needed, which was the knowledge of how the watch was supposed to work. He had failed. For 3 weeks, Sebastian Whitfield had disassembled, examined, cleaned, and reassembled the watch. He had identified an escapement variation that did not appear in any horological reference text he could locate. The pallet stones were set at an irregular angle. The balance staff seated against a custom-machined collet that no commercially available lubricant seemed to suit. The watch had a personality, and it was a personality Sebastian had never been introduced to. On Friday afternoon, less than 24 hours before the press preview opened, Sebastian had taken Walter Pemberton aside and told him quietly that he was preparing a graceful failure statement. The watch would be displayed in its display case, stopped at 347, as a, quote, symbol of the unfinished work of liberation, unquote. The PR team had drafted 3 different versions. Walter had told Sebastian he would think about it. What Walter was actually thinking, that Saturday morning, was that his entire career was about to end on his watch. The free public preview opened at 10 a.m. Lyric arrived at exactly 9:46. She paid the optional $5 suggested donation with 3 crumpled singles and 8 quarters she had been counting out from her Ziploc snack bag. She walked into the main hall. She looked at every case slowly, the way a person looks at faces in a crowd, hoping to recognize one. She stopped at the centerpiece. She stood there. For 23 minutes, she did not move. She looked at the watch through the glass from the front, from the side, from a low crouch, from a slightly raised position when she stood on her toes. She studied the case back, which was displayed propped open at a 45-degree angle on a small velvet support beside the closed watch. She studied the dial. She studied the painted sunrise. Then she walked to the side of the case, where the engraving on the open case back was easier to see, and she leaned in. Her fingers tightened on the strap of her backpack. Her breath fogged the glass. There, in the engraved scrollwork beside the small, circular opening that held the escapement, was a tiny hand-stamped mark. A 6-pointed sun, less than 1 millimeter wide, almost lost in the decorative pattern. A mark that nobody who had not been looking for it would ever see. Lyric stood up. She walked back to the center of the hall. That was when Edmund Vance arrived. The argument that followed was the one you heard at the beginning of this story. Vance gripped her shoulder and demanded she leave. Lyric, in her quiet voice, asked him to look at the watch. Vance refused. The argument drew attention. Other visitors stopped to watch. A small boy holding his mother's hand asked her what was happening. The mother whispered, "Honey, look at the next case." Sebastian Whitfield was in the lobby giving an interview to a young woman from the PBS production crew. He heard the commotion. He walked over with the patient expression of a man used to handling fans of his work. He saw Vance gripping a homeless teenager's shoulder. He intervened smoothly. "Edmund, let's keep things calm. Young lady, I appreciate your enthusiasm. The watch I'm working on is a very advanced mechanical instrument. It's not the sort of thing one fixes from the outside of a display case." His voice was warm, condescending in the careful way of a man who has been taught that condescension is courtesy. Lyric did not back down. "I'm not asking to fix it from the outside. I'm asking you to look. The escapement has a Cooper Greenwood variation, maybe the only one ever produced. My grandfather Booker Greenwood used to copy it for practice. He made me work on 3 different versions before I turned 13. Sebastian's smile remained warm. Cooper Greenwood variation. I'm afraid that's not a recognized term in horological literature, my dear. It's in the unpublished journal of John Bartlett Cooper, 1854, Detroit. He never published in his lifetime because he was a black man. The journal is held at the Hampton University Archives. I read a photocopy 3 years ago at the Providence Public Library. They got it through interlibrary loan because I asked. Sebastian's smile faltered. Not much, just a single degree, but everyone watching saw it. And what specifically, he said slowly, does this Cooper Greenwood variation do? It changes the angle of the pallet stones from 2 degrees to 1.8 degrees, which changes the lift, which changes the way the impulse is transmitted to the balance wheel. You can't use standard escapement oil. You need a mix of 3 lubricants in a specific ratio. My grandfather wrote the ratio in the back of his shop notebook. I have it memorized. Sebastian opened his mouth. He closed it again. That was when Walter Pemberton arrived. He had been called from the lobby by Vance, who had radioed him while Lyric was still speaking. Walter took one look at the scene, the girl in the gray hoodie, the security guard, the PBS producer hovering, the small crowd of preview visitors, and his face turned a careful diplomatic pink. "Edmund, please escort the young lady out. Apologies, ma'am. This is a private preview. Everyone, please continue. There is wine and small plates in the East Gallery." The small crowd shifted away awkwardly. Sebastian Whitfield walked back toward the lobby without making eye contact with anyone. Lyric Greenwood was escorted by Edmund Vance through the main doors and onto the granite steps outside. She did not resist. She did not raise her voice. She walked out with dignity. Outside, the late spring air smelled like rain and freshly cut grass from the small park across the street. Lyric sat down on the bottom step. She set her backpack between her knees. She did not cry. She opened her backpack. She took out a single black and white photograph. The same photograph that Miss Ophelia had let her keep 3 years ago. She looked at the man's face for a long time. That was when Dr. Catherine Ashford walked out of the museum doors. Catherine Ashford was the museum's chief curator and the lead curator of the Time and Liberty exhibition. She was 56 years old, with shoulder-length light brown hair going gray at the temples, no jewelry except a single watch on her left wrist, and the kind of focused intelligence that made people in meetings sit a little straighter when she spoke. She had been pulled away from the preview moments earlier by the assistant curator, Letitia Bryant, who had whispered, "Catherine, you need to come see this. There's a girl who knew about the Cooper Greenwood escapement." Catherine had reached the main hall just in time to see Walter Pemberton having Lyric escorted out. She had stood in the doorway watching, processing. Then she had quietly followed. She sat down next to Lyric on the granite step. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry about what just happened in there." Lyric did not look up from the photograph. "It wasn't your fault. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's all right. I'm not in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. You are very much not in trouble. Can you tell me again where you learned about the Cooper Greenwood variation?" So Lyric told her, the whole thing, about her grandfather Booker Greenwood, about his small watch repair shop in Detroit, on the corner of Mack and Mount Elliott, with a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Greenwood Watch Repair Est, 1971. About how the shop had 2 stools in front of the workbench, one tall enough for an adult and one small enough for a child, and how the small stool had her name carved into the back of it in capital letters that her grandfather had made her trace with her own finger when she was 6. About how he had taught her every Saturday from ages 7 to 13, beginning each lesson by pouring her a cup of black coffee that was 3/4 milk and asking her, "What did you read this week, baby?" Whatever she answered, he made her tell him the longest sentence she could remember. He said it built the memory muscle. He said the memory muscle was the most important thing she would ever own. He said a black girl with a strong memory could go anywhere and could be taken nowhere against her will. About the small green notebook he kept under the countertop, the cover scuffed and the spine repaired with electrical tape. Inside were his great-great-grandfather's hand-copied formulas. The notebook had passed through 5 generations. The first entries were dated 1854. The last entry, in her grandfather's careful upright handwriting, was dated November 2000 and 24 months before his death. It read, "Lyric, you know where everything is. Keep the work alive. Don't let it die with me." About how he had told her, the day before he went into the hospital with the pancreatic pain he had been hiding from her for 6 weeks, that her tools were her birthright and that she was descended from a long line of people who had built things with their hands when the world told them they could only break things. She told Catherine about her mother, Whitney Greenwood, who had taught math at Wayne County Community College for 14 years until breast cancer took her in 2018, when Lyric was 10 years old. Her mother had loved Toni Morrison and Octavia Butler and could solve a Rubik's Cube in under 4 minutes. The last book she had finished was Beloved. The last thing she had told Lyric was, "Don't lose your patience, baby. Most things in this world are fixable. You just have to sit with them long enough." She told her about her father, Maurice Greenwood, who had been a postal worker for 19 years before being convicted of mail fraud in 2015 for a crime he had not committed. The actual crime had been committed by a coworker who had used Maurice's login credentials. Maurice had no money for a private attorney. The public defender had carried 23 other open cases that month. He had taken a plea deal Maurice had been pressured into signing on a Friday afternoon. Maurice was now serving the 8th year of a 23-year sentence at Macomb Correctional Facility. He had written Lyric a letter every single week since the day he went in. She had every letter in a shoebox at the back of her locker at the library. 291 letters as of last week. About foster care in Pittsburgh, which had begun gently with a kind older couple named the Halversons and had ended badly 6 months later when she was accused of stealing a 14-karat gold bracelet that one of the other foster children, a 13-year-old boy named Andre, had actually taken. The Halversons had wanted to believe her. The placement agency had not. The bracelet was found in Andre's gym bag 3 weeks after Lyric had been moved to a different placement. No one had ever told the Halversons about leaving voluntarily at 15 after her third placement had become unsafe, in a way she did not feel like describing in detail to a museum curator she had just met. About traveling to Providence because her grandfather had once said that, "Our people came up to Providence first, before Detroit, before everything. There's something there, not money, something." About being homeless for the past 21 months, sleeping behind a brick retaining wall in Memorial Park, washing her face in the basement of a library at 5:36 every morning, and waiting, although she would not have used that word herself, for the world to ask her to show it what she could do. She told Catherine about the McKinney-Vento Act, which Catherine knew about but had never heard explained so precisely by a teenager. Lyric had used the Act's provisions to enroll herself in a homeless student program at Providence Community College, where she had completed 12 audit credits in mechanical engineering and material conservation. She had no transcript because she had no permanent address. But she had read every textbook on the syllabus, and the professors knew her. Catherine listened. She did not interrupt. When Lyric was finished, Catherine asked one more question. "May I see that photograph you've been holding?" Lyric handed it over. Catherine looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she turned it over. On the back, in faded fountain pen ink, the same handwriting as the front, S. Greenwood, free clockmaker of Providence, with his daughter Pearl Greenwood, age 14. Aprilo 1850, she opt. Catherine went very still. "Lyric," she said, "I want you to wait here for 1 minute. I'm going inside. I'll be right back. Don't move. Promise me." "I promise." Catherine went back into the museum. Through the glass doors, Lyric could see her speaking rapidly to Letitia Bryant. Catherine showed Letitia the photograph. Letitia's hand went up to her mouth. 3 minutes later, Catherine came back out. She sat down next to Lyric again. Letitia came out behind her, holding a small archival folder. "Lyric," Catherine said, "I need to show you something. May I?" "Yes." Catherine opened the folder. Inside was a printed reproduction of a photograph the museum already owned. The photograph showed an older black man in a black frock coat, standing beside a small workbench, holding a pocket watch in his right hand. The reproduction was captioned, "Reverend Solomon Greenwood, founder of the Providence Free African Society, circa 1862. Catherine held the two photographs side by side. The faces were the same face, older in one, younger in the other, but the same face, the same line of the jaw, the same slight downward slope of the left eyebrow, the same careful way the hands held the small object in front of him. "Lyric," Catherine said quietly. "The man in your photograph and the man in our reference photograph are the same person." Lyric did not say anything. She was looking at the two pictures. "Sweetheart, I have something to ask you. What was your grandfather's full name?" "Booker Joseph Greenwood. Born 1953 inches Detroit. Died 2021. And his father's name? Joseph Greenwood. Born 1929 inches Detroit. He died before I was born. And his father's name? I don't know. Grandpa never said. He said his own grandfather was the one who taught him watchmaking, and that grandfather had come up from somewhere in the South. He never told me where." Catherine took a slow breath. "Lyric. Solomon Greenwood had 4 children. The eldest was Pearl Greenwood, who is in your photograph. The next was a son named Joseph Greenwood. Joseph Greenwood moved to Detroit in 1879. His descendants were lost to the historical record in the 1920s. We have been trying to trace them for 3 years as part of the research for this exhibition." Lyric looked up from the photographs. For the first time, she looked at Catherine's face directly. "You're saying," she said slowly, "that the man whose watch I tried to fix this morning was... I think he was your great-great-great-grandfather, Lyric." Letitia Bryant had been holding her phone. She was now openly crying. Catherine reached over and squeezed Lyric's hand. Lyric did not cry. She just held the two photographs, one in each hand, and looked at the face of the man who had been waiting on the back of a discarded library photo in her backpack for 3 years. Then Lyric said, finally, "I really should fix his watch." Catherine stood up. She wiped her own face with the back of her hand. Yes, sweetheart, I think you should. Will you come back inside with me? I need to make some phone calls, and we need to do this the right way." The hour that followed was one of the strangest hours in the recent history of the Westmoreland Horological Heritage Museum. Catherine Ashford called Reginald Drayton II, the 71-year-old chairman of the museum's board of directors. Reginald had been preparing for the press preview that evening from his home on the east side. He came down to the museum in 20 minutes. He arrived in a charcoal three-piece suit, looking the way men of his generation look when they are about to attend a funeral or a wedding and they are not entirely sure which. Catherine briefed him. She showed him the two photographs. She showed him Lyric's notebook, which Lyric had reluctantly handed over after Letitia had assured her she would get it back. The notebook was 83 pages long. It contained detailed diagrams of escapements, balance assemblies, gear trains, mainspring barrels. It included the page from her grandfather's shop notebook with the 3-oil ratio for the Cooper Greenwood variant. It included her own sketches of the Solomon Greenwood pocket watch, drawn from memory from photographs she had seen in the museum's pre-publicity materials online. Reginald looked at the notebook for a long time. Then he looked at Lyric, who was sitting at the small conference room table next to Letitia, eating a granola bar Letitia had handed her. "Young lady," he said quietly, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Yes, sir." "Where did you sleep last night?" "Memorial Park, sir, behind the brick retaining wall near the riverside." "And the night before?" "Same place. Most nights." Reginald nodded once. He looked at Catherine. "Get Walter," he said, "and get Sebastian." Walter Pemberton walked into the conference room 10 minutes later. He had not yet been told what had happened. He was still operating under the assumption that the homeless girl had been ejected and the matter resolved. When he saw Lyric sitting at the table with a granola bar in her hand, he stopped in the doorway. "What is going on here?" Reginald did not raise his voice. "Walter, sit down. We have a situation we need to discuss." Walter sat down. Reginald briefed him in 5 minutes. Catherine showed him the photographs. Walter said nothing for a long time. His face had gone the color of old paper. Finally, he said, "Are we certain about the lineage?" "No," Catherine said. "Not yet. We will need genealogical research to confirm. But the photograph in this young woman's possession is original, undocumented, and a near match for our reference. The handwriting on the back matches an example we have in our archives, and her knowledge of the Cooper Greenwood variation is not knowledge that anyone outside a very small academic circle could possess." Sebastian Whitfield arrived a moment later. He had been called by Catherine directly. He came into the conference room slowly. He looked at Lyric. He looked at the photograph spread out on the table. He sat down without being asked. "Miss Greenwood," he said. "Mr. Whitfield, I would like, with your permission and the board's permission, to invite you into the conservation lab. I would like to watch you work on the watch. I want to learn what I missed." Walter Pemberton started to object. "Reginald, this is highly irregular. The contract with Sebastian is, the insurance is. We can't have a minor handling." Reginald cut him off without looking at him. "Walter, if the girl in this chair is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Reverend Solomon Greenwood, and if she can do what she says she can do, then she is not handling a museum artifact. She is restoring a piece of her own family's history. Catherine, get the McKinney-Vento attorney from Family Services on the phone. Letitia, find this young woman a meal that isn't a granola bar. Sebastian, go set up the lab. We will reconvene in 90 minutes. Walter Pemberton opened his mouth. Reginald looked at him for the first time. "Walter, we can do this the right way, or we can do it the way you started doing it this morning. Choose." Walter closed his mouth. 90 minutes later, in the museum's small conservation lab, the Reverend Solomon Greenwood pocket watch was placed in the center of a velvet-lined workbench under a ring of soft white halogen light. A high-definition camera on a small tripod was positioned to record everything that happened. Beside the camera, Letitia Bryant was filming on her phone, with Lyric's permission, in case the museum's official recording failed. Sebastian Whitfield stood on one side of the bench. Catherine Ashford stood on the other. Reginald sat in a chair against the wall. Walter sat next to him, very straight. Lyric was wearing a clean white cotton glove on each hand. She had washed her face and hands in the museum's staff bathroom. She had eaten a proper meal of grilled cheese and tomato soup that Letitia had brought from a deli down the street. She had asked for, and been given, 20 minutes alone in the conference room to sit quietly and look at the photograph of Reverend Solomon Greenwood. She had said nothing about that 20 minutes when she came out. Catherine had not asked. She opened her grandfather's tool roll on the corner of the workbench. The leather creaked the way old leather does, the way a saddle creaks when it has carried weight for a long time. The brass tools inside caught the light. She selected a small flat-blade screwdriver, 16 millimeters long, With a wooden handle her grandfather had turned on a lathe in 1972. She lifted the pocket watch with the gloved fingers of her left hand. She turned it over. She positioned a small jeweler's loop in her right eye. She looked at the caseback. "There," she said softly. She was not speaking to anyone in particular. She was just speaking. "Right there, the sun stamp. Mr. Whitfield, do you see it?" Sebastian leaned in. He put his own loop to his eye. He stared at the caseback. He had been staring at this caseback for 3 weeks. He had photographed it under multiple light sources. He had run it under a microscope. "I see it now," he said. His voice was almost a whisper. "I will be damned." "It's small," Lyric said. "Grandpa told me Cooper made it small on purpose. He didn't want anyone else copying his work. He wanted only the people he had taught to recognize it. He used to say, 'The man who knows what to look for already knows where to look.'" She opened the case back. The movement of the watch was exposed. Sebastian, looking over her shoulder through his own loop, made a small, involuntary sound. For the next 47 minutes, Lyric Greenwood worked in near-total silence. She disassembled the keyless works. She removed the balance and the pallet fork. She examined the pallet stones under the loop. She measured the angle with a tool she had made herself from a sliver of a brass shim, calibrated against a protractor she had memorized from a 1989 horological reference text. She confirmed Sebastian's earlier observation that the angle was not standard. She confirmed that the angle was exactly 1.8 degrees. She replaced a tiny click spring in the keyless works. The replacement spring was one she had made herself, 3 months earlier, on the workbench of the Providence Community College's machine shop, using their micromill during an audit course on precision machining. She had been carrying that spring in her tool roll because she had a feeling when she made it that it would someday be needed. She cleaned the pallet stones with a tiny brush dipped in a cleaning solution Sebastian recognized from his own supplies. She set the stones at the correct angle using a wooden jig her grandfather had made for her when she was 9. She lubricated the escapement. She mixed 3 commercially available watch oils in a specific ratio, drop by drop, in a small ceramic dish that Letitia had taken from the museum break room. The ratio came out of her memory. She did not write it down. She did not need to. She reassembled the movement. Her hands moved without hesitation. Sebastian watched the sequence and recognized, in real time, that he had performed several of the same operations himself, in a different order, with subtly different timing. She was not doing anything he had not also done. She was simply doing them in the order they were meant to be done. "You're going by feel," he said softly. "You're not following a schematic." "There isn't a schematic," Lyric said, without looking up. "Grandpa burned the schematics. He said they made you lazy. He said your hands had to know the order. He used to make me do this with my eyes closed when I was 11. "With your eyes closed?" "On a practice watch. Not this watch." She closed the case back. There was a small, audible click as the threading caught. She wound the watch. Slowly. She counted 27 half-turns of the crown. Then she stopped. She held the watch in the palm of her white-gloved hand. She let it rest. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a small, clear sound. Tick. Then again. Tick. Then again. The Reverend Solomon Greenwood pocket watch, which had not run since approximately 1962, was running. Catherine Ashford put her hand over her mouth. She did not realize she was crying until Letitia touched her elbow. Sebastian Whitfield did not move. He was watching Lyric's face. Lyric was looking at the watch in her palm, a small smile. Not large, not for anyone in the room, just for the watch and for her grandfather and possibly for a man named Solomon Greenwood who had died in 1881 and who had finally, after 163 years, gotten his watch back. Sebastian Whitfield was the first to speak. "Miss Greenwood," he cleared his throat. "Miss Greenwood, I owe you an apology and a thank you, and, if you are willing, a request to be your student." Lyric looked up. She extended her right hand. "I'll teach you." "Yes." They shook hands. Letitia was filming. The video would, in a different way, change everything. Reginald Drayton stood. He had not said a single word in 53 minutes. He walked over to the workbench. He looked at the ticking watch in Lyric's palm. He looked at Lyric. "Miss Greenwood, the board of this museum is going to need to make some very significant decisions in the next 24 hours. I would be grateful if you would allow Dr. Ashford and Miss Bryant to help guide you through what is about to happen. There will be press. There will be paperwork. There will be people who want things from you. I want you to know that anything you do not want to do, you do not have to do. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." And one more thing. If you don't already have somewhere safer than a park bench to sleep tonight, you do tonight, Catherine. Already on it, Catherine said. Walter Pemberton was standing now. He had not been told to stand. He just was. He took one step toward Lyric. He looked at her, then at the watch, then back at her. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then he opened it once more. Miss Greenwood, I was wrong this morning. I am so sorry. I know. Lyric did not say more. She did not need to. Reginald cleared his throat. He looked at Sebastian. Sebastian, take Miss Greenwood for a meal. Catherine, find her somewhere to rest. The press preview is in 5 hours. We have decisions to make in the next 90 minutes that this organization will be living with for the next 20 years. Walter, you and I are going to my office. Now, the two older men left the conservation lab together. Walter did not look at anyone as he walked out. Catherine guided Lyric into the small employee lounge at the back of the conservation wing. She closed the door. She made Lyric sit down in a soft armchair by the window. She brought her a glass of water. Then she sat down across from her and took both of Lyric's gloved hands in her own. Lyric, look at me. Are you okay? I'm okay. You're sure? I am sure. Sweetheart, 20 minutes ago you fixed something nobody else in the world could fix. 2 hours ago you found out who your great-great-great-grandfather was. This morning a man put his hands on you and called you a thief. You are allowed to not be okay. Lyric looked down at her hands inside Catherine's. The white cotton gloves were spotted with the tiniest dots of dark oil at the fingertips. Her grandfather had told her that the only watchmakers who never got oil on their gloves were the ones who weren't really working. I think, she said slowly. I am tired, Dr. Ashford. Catherine, I am tired, Catherine. I have been waiting a long time to do that. I know you have. Catherine reached up to the side table and picked up the wireless phone. She dialed a 4-digit extension. Letitia, come to the lounge. Bring the dress and the shoes, and bring her a sandwich. The grilled cheese kind. Yes. With the tomato soup again? Thank you. The press preview opened that evening. 48 hours of frantic adjustment had reshaped everything. Catherine had spent 2 of those hours on the phone with the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families, the museum's general counsel, and a McKinney-Vento attorney named Adrian Beale Whitmore. The attorney had agreed to meet with Lyric Monday morning. He had also agreed, when Catherine pressed him, to be reachable by phone all weekend. He understood what was at stake. He was a black man who had grown up in foster care in Cranston. He told Catherine he would not be sleeping much over the next 72 hours. Letitia had spent 3 of those hours coordinating with the museum's PR team. She had negotiated, on Lyric's behalf, 3 protections. First, no questions about Lyric's homelessness from any reporter. Second, no photographs without Lyric's explicit consent. Third, no press release would carry Lyric's last known address. The PR team had not pushed back. They were a young team and they had seen enough. Reginald had spent 4 of those hours in his home library with his wife Eleanor, a retired Rhode Island Superior Court judge. They had talked through the entire situation. Eleanor had asked one question. Reginald, did the young woman ask for any of this? Reginald had said no. Eleanor had said, then we proceed slowly, and we let her say no to anything she wants to say no to. Sebastian had spent his hours quietly. He had returned to the conservation lab. He had laid out his own tools beside Lyric's on the workbench. He had taken a sheet of paper and a pencil. He had begun to sketch from memory the exact sequence in which Lyric had worked the watch. He filled 4 pages. When he was done, he placed the 4 pages inside the cover of his own laboratory notebook. He intended to study them for the rest of his career. Walter Pemberton had spent his hours in his office with the door closed. Reginald had spoken to him for 40 minutes. The conversation had been private. What had been said in that office, no one outside the room ever learned. But when Walter walked out at 4 p.m., he was holding a single sheet of paper. It was his resignation letter, handwritten. Lyric was introduced at the press preview not as a guest, not as an exhibit, but as a co-curator. She wore a simple navy dress that Letitia had picked up for her at a small boutique on Wickenden Street. The dress fit. Catherine had quietly paid for it out of her own pocket. Lyric was given 4 minutes at the podium during the opening remarks. She had insisted on writing her own statement. She had handwritten it on a piece of legal pad paper that she kept folded in her hand. She did not look at it. She had memorized it the way she had memorized everything else she cared about. She spoke about her grandfather, Booker Greenwood. She spoke about Saturday afternoons in a small shop in Detroit. She spoke about the smell of old grease and brass dust, and the patience required to set a single pallet stone correctly. She spoke about the Cooper Greenwood escapement and the small community of 19th-century African-American watchmakers whose names had not survived in the textbooks but whose work had. She did not mention her homelessness. She did not need to. At the end, she paused for a long second. Then she said, "The watch on the pedestal behind me belonged to my great-great-great-grandfather. I did not know that until this morning. He was a free black clockmaker, a preacher, an abolitionist, and a father. He timed the meetings of the Underground Railroad with this watch. He used a watch to give people a chance at freedom. Tonight the watch is ticking again, and I want to thank everyone in this room who decided, this morning, to take a chance on a girl in a hoodie. Some of you took that chance, some of you didn't. Both of those decisions matter. Thank you." She stepped back from the podium. The applause lasted 43 seconds. Catherine timed it without meaning to. The first reporter to reach Lyric afterward was a woman from PBS named Renata Holloway Pearson. Renata had been on the cultural beat for 11 years. She had seen many openings. She did not usually cry at them. She did at this one. She walked up to Lyric with the camera off, just to introduce herself before any official interview. "Miss Greenwood, my name is Renata. I produce the cultural segment for NewsHour. I would like to come to the museum tomorrow, with one camera, no studio lights, and ask you about your grandfather. Not about tonight, about him. Would that be all right with you?" Lyric thought about it. She looked at Catherine, who had been standing one step behind her. Catherine nodded. "Yes," Lyric said. "But I want to do it on the bench in Memorial Park where I used to sleep." Renata did not flinch. She wrote it down in a small reporter's notebook. "Yes, I will bring 2 folding chairs and 2 coffees. What time?" 7 a.m. "The light is best then." 7 a.m. it is. "Thank you, Miss Greenwood." The segment that aired the following Tuesday became the most watched cultural segment in PBS NewsHour's history. The opening shot was a static frame of the brick retaining wall in Memorial Park, with a small reproduction 19th-century gas lamp burning above it. The voiceover was Renata's. "This is where Lyric Greenwood slept for the last 21 months of her life. Last Saturday morning, she walked from this wall to the museum on the hill. By that evening, she had made a watch tick that had been silent for 62 years. We came here this morning to ask her how she did it. What she told us is not what we expected to hear." The segment ran 12 minutes. Lyric talked about her grandfather. She talked about libraries. She talked about the McKinney-Vento Act, by name, twice. She talked about a sandwich Miss Ophelia had given her on a Thursday morning 2 summers ago, when Lyric was so dizzy from low blood sugar she had walked into the periodicals shelf. Lyric said, "A librarian saw me. That is the whole story. A librarian saw me. Everything that has happened to me since then started with that one person seeing me." Miss Ophelia Bridges, watching the broadcast in her small home in South Providence, cried at her kitchen table. By Sunday morning, the 4-minute clip Letitia Bryant had filmed of Lyric winding the watch for the first time had been posted to Letitia's personal Instagram with the consent of Lyric, Catherine, and the museum board. By 6 a.m., it had been shared by Soledad O'Brien. By 8 a.m., by Brian Stevenson. By noon, the clip had been viewed 900,000 times. By Sunday night, 4.3 million. The headlines moved fast. The New York Times. "A lost heritage watch comes back to life, thanks to a 17-year-old descendant." The Washington Post. "How a homeless teenager saved a $14.2 million heritage exhibition." PBS NewsHour ran a 12-minute featured segment Monday evening, anchored by Amna Nawaz. Smithsonian Magazine commissioned a full-length piece on Lyric for its June issue. The educational layer of the coverage was unusual. Reporters did not just report Lyric's story, they reported the systems around her story. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, signed into law in 1987, the federal protection ensuring that homeless students could enroll in schools without permanent addresses, the very provision Lyric had used to take community college courses in mechanical engineering. The Department of Education's most recent estimate that 1.3 million American minors experience homelessness in any given year, 68% of whom test above average on standardized intelligence assessments, less than 3% of whom go on to complete a 4-year college degree. The story of African American watchmakers and clockmakers in 19th century America was covered as well. Benjamin Banneker, who had built a striking wooden clock from memory in 1753, after examining a borrowed pocket watch for 1 week. James Fortin, the Philadelphia sailmaker whose precision rope work funded abolitionist publications. Lewis Latimer, the draftsman who drew the plans for Alexander Graham Bell's telephone patent, names that had largely been left out of the standard high school textbook treatments of 19th-century American invention. Sebastian Whitfield gave one interview to Horological Times magazine. He said, "I had everything Lyric Greenwood had. I had the training, the resources, the credentials. I had 3 weeks with that watch. I could not see what was right in front of me. She had nothing, and she saw it in 23 minutes through a glass case. The difference was not skill. The difference was that her grandfather had taught her to look at the work, not at the worker." That quote ran on the cover of Time magazine. Walter Pemberton resigned as executive director of the Westmoreland Horological Heritage Museum on the Wednesday morning following the press preview. The resignation letter was 3 sentences long. It did not include an apology, which the board noted privately. The board accepted his resignation and granted him an honorary chairmanship without operational authority, a position that came with no salary and no office. He left the museum that afternoon with a single cardboard box of personal items. He has not spoken publicly since. Reginald Drayton went further. He proposed, and the board approved by a unanimous 9-0 vote, the establishment of a permanent program at the museum to be called the Lyric Greenwood Apprenticeship in Horological Heritage. The program offered full 4-year paid apprenticeships in horology and material culture conservation to African American youth, with priority given to applicants who had experienced housing insecurity. The first cohort, 12 apprentices, was announced 2 months later. 4 of the 12 had experienced homelessness within the previous 3 years. Edmund Vance did not lose his job. Lyric Greenwood specifically asked Catherine Ashford to advocate for him. Vance was required to complete a 40-hour course on the McKinney-Vento Act and Homeless Youth Services and to attend a 6-week equity training program. He completed both. 6 months later, he wrote Lyric a handwritten apology letter on a piece of yellow legal paper. The letter was 4 paragraphs long. He apologized for the assumptions he had made. He apologized for the way his hand had touched her shoulder. He told her about his own grandmother, who had cleaned houses in East Providence for 31 years, and who had taught him, at 5 years old, that you did not put your hand on a person without asking. He admitted that he had forgotten that. He thanked her for letting him stay at the museum. He signed the letter with his full name and badge number. Lyric read the letter twice. She wrote him back a short note thanking him. They had Sunday brunch at a diner near the museum a month later. Catherine paid. They have continued the brunch every other month. Dr. Catherine Ashford filed a petition with the Rhode Island Family Court for guardianship of Lyric Greenwood on the Tuesday following the press preview. The family services attorney whom Reginald had called on Saturday morning, Adrian Beale Whitmore, had been working on the paperwork since that very afternoon. The petition was approved in 4 months. Lyric moved into Catherine's home on the east side of Providence on a Saturday in late September. She had her own room for the first time in 4 years. There was a small desk by the window. On the desk was her grandfather Booker's tool roll, kept open, the way she had been taught. On the wall beside the desk was a framed photograph of Reverend Solomon Greenwood and his daughter Pearl, April 1858. On the shelf above the desk were 3 working antique pocket watches she had repaired in her first month of living there, a small jar of mixed escapement oil, and a thin spiral notebook in which she was writing her own grandfather's 3-oil ratio in formal manuscript form. She intended to publish it. The first month with Catherine was hard in ways neither of them had anticipated. Lyric did not sleep through the night for the first 11 days. She would wake at 4:52, the same time she had been waking for 21 months. And she would lie still in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room and try to remember how to fall back asleep. On the 12th night, Catherine had heard her up at 4:53. Catherine had gotten up, made 2 cups of chamomile tea, and brought one to Lyric's room. She had not said anything about why she was up. She had just sat on the floor beside Lyric's bed, sipping her tea, until the sun came up. After that, Lyric began to sleep. She had her own bathroom for the first time in her life. The first time she took a long, hot shower without thinking about how long the water was running, she stayed in the shower for 43 minutes. Catherine did not knock. When Lyric came out, Catherine had laid out a folded towel and a small mug of coffee on the bathroom counter. There was a sticky note on the mug. It said simply, "Take your time, sweetheart. We are not in a hurry." Lyric kept the sticky note. "She still has it. It is taped inside the cover of her grandfather's tool roll. Lyric enrolled at the Wheeler School, a private day school in Providence, on a full scholarship the school created specifically for her. She also formally enrolled at the Providence Community College for the apprenticeship's evening seminar series and at the American School of Horology's apprentice track. She continued to study. She continued to take notes. She continued to fix watches. She visited her father, Maurice Greenwood, at Macomb Correctional Facility in Michigan every 6 weeks. The visit was complicated and expensive. Catherine paid for the flights. Catherine sometimes came with her. Maurice and Catherine had begun a careful, slow friendship through letters. Lyric filed a formal petition for review of her father's conviction with the Midwest Innocence Project. The petition was accepted in early 2025. As of this writing, his case is in active review. On the visit before this story was written, Lyric told her father, through the thick plexiglass with the round speaking grate, about the Cooper Greenwood escapement and about Solomon Greenwood. Her father listened without interrupting for 19 minutes. Then he pressed his palm against the plexiglass and said, "Baby, your grandfather knew. He always knew. He just did not have the words." Lyric pressed her own palm against the glass to meet his. They held that pose for the last 40 seconds of the visit, until the guard called time. Lyric walked out of the visiting room without crying. She cried later. In the rental car, Catherine had driven all the way from Providence with her. She cried for 9 minutes. Catherine did not say anything. She just drove. That is what Catherine had learned to do. The Westmoreland Museum, in partnership with the American Library Association, established the Greenwood Tools Program. Funded at $4.6 million in its first year, the program placed micro-workshops in the public libraries of 17 American cities. Each workshop included a set of beginner watchmaking tools, a small collection of vintage practice watches, a curated horology reference library, and a part-time stipended mentor. The first year served 241 youth. The second year, 680. The third year, planning for 1,400. The Reverend Solomon Greenwood pocket watch sits in its display case in the main hall of the Time and Liberty exhibition, which has been extended 3 times and is now scheduled to remain on permanent display. Lyric Greenwood winds the watch herself, once a week, every Saturday, at exactly 3:47 p.m. She does this in front of the public when she is in Providence. She does it before the museum opens when she is traveling. She always finishes the winding by saying a single sentence aloud, quietly, to herself. She has never told anyone what the sentence is, Catherine asked her once. Lyric smiled and said, "It is between me and my grandfather." The first cohort of the Lyric Greenwood Apprenticeship in Horological Heritage met for the first time in the Conservation Lab on a Monday morning in late October. There were 12 apprentices. They had been selected from over 400 applications, drawn from 26 states. The youngest was 16. The oldest was 22. 4 of them had experienced housing insecurity in the previous 3 years. 3 had aged out of foster care. 2 were the first in their families to consider college. All 12 were African American. Lyric was 17 years old and 4 months when she walked into the lab for that first meeting. She wore a clean white cotton shirt and a pair of dark jeans Catherine had bought her at the Wickenden Street boutique. Her grandfather's tool roll was tucked under her arm. She did not introduce herself as a co-curator or a public figure. She introduced herself as Lyric, from Detroit, and asked everyone to tell her 2 things: their name, and the name of the person who had taught them something with their hands. The answers took 37 minutes. A grandmother who had taught a 16-year-old to braid hair, a neighbor who had taught a 19-year-old to change a car battery, an older brother who had taught a 20-year-old to solder a radio, a mother, deceased, who had taught a 22-year-old to make biscuits from scratch. The room grew quiet by the end. No one had ever asked them this question in this setting. Lyric said, "Whoever taught you these things gave you a gift. We are going to honor that gift here. Whatever you learn in this lab, we are going to teach it to the next person who needs it. Are we agreed?" The 12 apprentices said yes, in 12 different voices, in 12 different inflections of the same word. So where are they now? Lyric Greenwood is 18 years old. She is a junior at the Wheeler School with a grade point average of 3.94. She is the youngest apprentice ever accepted to the American School of Horology in its 62-year history. She has restored 23 additional antique watches since the Greenwood watch. She has spoken at the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Detroit Institute of Arts, and the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. She has done 31 interviews. She has not done a single interview without placing the original 1,858 photograph of Reverend Solomon Greenwood on the desk beside her. She still carries a small square of yellow embroidered cloth cut from her grandmother's apron in her grandfather's tool roll. It is the first thing she touches each morning. Dr. Catherine Ashford, 57, continues as chief curator of the Westmoreland. She formally adopted Lyric in early 2026. They have Sunday breakfast together every week. Sebastian Whitfield, 42, resigned his consulting contract with the museum and accepted a permanent staff position at a significantly reduced salary. He has trained 8 of Lyric's 12 fellow apprentices. He still calls her Miss Greenwood. He says she taught him the most important lesson of his career. In 2025, he and Lyric co-authored a paper in Horological Times titled The Cooper-Greenwood Lever Escapement, Recovering a Lost Variant of American Mechanism. The paper has been cited 87 times. Reginald Drayton II, 73, continues to chair the museum board. He has tripled the museum's diversity programming and personally donated $2.4 million of his own money to the Greenwood Tools program. He still wears a charcoal 3-piece suit to every meeting. He still does not say much. When he does, the room listens. Edmund Vance, 53, is still a security guard at the Westmoreland. He now leads a small mentorship program for new security hires that includes McKinney-Vento education and the basics of trauma-informed customer service. He brings his lunch every day. He always greets Lyric first. She always greets him back. They had brunch together last weekend. They split the bill this time. Miss Ophelia Bridges, 68, is preparing to retire from the Providence Public Library in 2027. Lyric has quietly arranged, through speaking fees and one private donation she negotiated herself, to pay off Miss Ophelia's modest home mortgage as a retirement gift. Miss Ophelia does not know yet. The plan is to surprise her at the retirement party. Mr. Marvel Singletary, the 71-year-old night janitor at the Providence Public Library, did not learn that he had played a role in this story until a reporter from the Providence Journal called him for a comment in February of 2025. When asked why he had quietly opened the back door for Lyric every morning for 2 years, he said, "She was not bothering nobody, and I knew her grandfather's people, not directly, just the way you know somebody's people when they walk like that. Quiet and careful, like they know the floor is borrowed." The library board awarded him the Mary Sparks Award for service to the community at their annual gala. He attended in a borrowed suit. Miss Ophelia tied his tie. He brought his 8-year-old granddaughter, Sage, who was the only person at his table during the dinner. Walter Pemberton continues to live quietly in Pennsylvania. He attends a small Quaker meeting and a weekly community service shift at a homeless youth shelter outside Philadelphia. He has never asked to be acknowledged for the service. The shelter director, who knows who he is, has never offered. They have an agreement. Maurice Greenwood remains incarcerated at Macomb Correctional Facility, but his case is now publicly known. The Midwest Innocence Project has assigned 3 attorneys to it. New evidence has been filed. A hearing has been scheduled for late 2026. His daughter visits him every 6 weeks, and she always brings him a small, hand-drawn diagram of a watch movement. He keeps every one of them taped to the wall above his bunk. Lyric was asked, in an interview with Smithsonian Magazine, what she would tell another homeless teenager who might be watching the segment. Her answer was unusual. She did not look at the camera. She looked down at her grandfather's tool roll, which she had laid open on the desk in front of her. "Your grandparents taught you something," she said, "even if you do not remember what it was, even if you never met them. The thing you can do, the thing you keep doing when nobody is watching, that is what they taught you. Hold on to it. The world is going to ask you to put it down. Don't. The world is going to tell you it does not matter. They are wrong. Eventually, someone is going to ask you to show them. And when that moment comes, you will be ready." She paused, then looked up. "And until that moment, find a librarian. There is always a librarian. They are the keepers of the door."
And so, my question to you tonight is this. Has there been a person in your life who showed something in you that nobody else did? A teacher who kept you after class to give you a book, a grandparent you taught you craft when you were small and you did not understand at that time, who read eastward, a librarian who save you a sandwiches, a labor who pays for your bus bath. Tell me their name in the comment below, just their first name, and I read everyone, and I want them to know their matter. If this story moves you, hit the like button, say it with someone who needs to hear it. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. I will see you in the next video. But before you go, remember this. The next great discovery in your community, in your country, on this earth. Maybe the person you almost did not see. Their genius do not cry and throw. It just leaves someone brave enough to look. So look today. The person you almost did not is waiting. I wrote this story on the quietest Tuesday in March after volunteering at the homeless shelter in my own city. I met a 16-year-old girl there who could quote half of Toni Morrison from memory. She has been sleeping in her aunt's car for 9 months. She was the smartest person in shelter and probably the smartest person on the entire block. I asked her what she wants to be when she grows up. She says, someone who reads other people's books. I keep thinking about her. I keep wondering who is going to be one up to ask her to show them. If you know a kid like that, sleeping in the car, sleeping in a shelter, sleeping behind a library, tell them they are sin. Even if they believe you, tell them anyway. The world has a long habit. If not seeing genius until it is grafted in rice cloth, do not be what be the librarian, be the curator, be the one who look. Tell me the comment who saw you when nobody else did. I read everyone. See you next week.